All right, this is going to be a more relaxed and I guess by consequence less focused, I suppose, video than I normally do. I usually have a pretty strong outline of what I want to say and what I want to get across, and while I hardly ever script word for word what I want to say, again, I usually do have a fairly strong outline, but this one's just going to be kind of a bit of, instead of a structured ramble, this is going to be, I guess, more of a free-flowing ramble, and I'm going to start with one point, and I'm just going to kind of tailor it off to hit some points and see where I go with it. So when teams get into the off seasons, I'm going to talk about the Ohio teams that I like. When teams like the Browns and the Cavs, when they go into their off season, it usually starts with a bit of sadness because with the vast majority of sports teams, since only one team per league actually comes away with the championship, unless there's some like weird rules or whatever, but besides that, then you've usually been eliminated in some way, shape, or form. Either you've had a really tough playoff series like the Cavs just went through where they get embarrassed by the Knicks, or the Browns where they just weren't even good enough to make the playoffs after the team had maybe too lofty of expectations from the fan base, but you look at the Browns roster and think you should be able to at least compete for a playoff spot, whereas they were kind of on the outside looking in. Essentially, when it started to get, like, as soon as crunch time started, they were pretty much on the outside looking in on that playoff race. So when the offseason finally starts, there is at least a tinge of sadness, and you're upset that your team fell short of the ultimate goal or didn't even reach you didn't even reach their goals that season if they were less lofty than getting a championship, or even if even if they're rebuilding, that's still a miserable season whether you expect it or not. So there's always that tinge of sadness of, well, I guess the season's over. But then you reflect on the season and you realize that the season was what it was, and you start to move on. And then when the off season really starts, then boredom really starts to hit and set in. And I feel like that's where a lot of some of these things that I'm about to talk about with a couple of the Cleveland teams started to happen on social media a little bit, where a few days ago I see that Donovan Mitchell is trending and I think, oh no, because when a player on your team is trending and you're not playing, so it's not like they're raving about some outstanding performance on the field or the court or whatever, it can very easily become like some really weird and bad drama, or maybe Donovan Mitchell has said something crazy or anything like that. But essentially what was going on is that the Guardians were playing the Mets in a series, and Donovan Mitchell, being a kid that's from New York and cheered for the Mets in those New York area teams for throughout his entire childhood and still now, he was tweeting out in support of the Mets against the Guardians. I also saw that there might have been some backup tweet of one of the Mets players saying that there was something going on in like the Guardians locker room when they were then the Cleveland Indians then locker room or something like that. I'm not really sure. I think that tweet was deleted because I very quickly scrolled through Donovan Mitchell's Twitter and didn't see what the hubbub was all about that. And I'm not playing Twitter police looking for deleted tweets on screenshots or anything like that. It wasn't worth my time. And so then you start to see all of these takes about, oh, well, if Donovan Mitchell doesn't want to be in Cleveland, then trade him, or Donovan Mitchell clearly doesn't have the heart here. And then there's the equal pushback of course, this is all really silly, and we're getting this riled up over somebody cheering for the team that they've cheered for their entire life in a different sport that in theory should have nothing to do with his wanting to be on the Cleveland Cavaliers roster. Like, there's obviously no actual news sources here. There's actually nothing of substance to take away from this other than the fact that Donovan Mitchell is a Mets fan, and he has been for pretty much his entire life, or at least he's publicly, I mean, I'm not inside his head or anything, he's publicly portraying himself as a Mets fan, and he's done that throughout his entire life and career. So again, I don't think this is cause for panic that Donovan Mitchell is all of a sudden going, demanding the Cavs front office for a trade or anything like that. Now, whether or not the Cavs end up having to do something with him in the long term might be a different story, but it's not going to be because he rooted for the Mets against the Guardians in a random series in the middle of May. That's not an actual story. But again, that's when the offseason boredom kicks in, where we're watching other NBA teams. What the Heat are doing right now is insane. The Denver Nuggets run finally feels like Jamal Murray and Jokic, they're finally getting their time in the sun, and we're seeing what they can do in the finals now. So that's starting to get in. We also saw this on Cleveland Twitter again with Nick Chubb, where it feels like the offseason for the Browns started, and a couple weeks later, everyone kind of collectively got like really angry about like, hey, they shouldn't trade Nick Chubb, right? And I think most normal people agreed. I mean, obviously you'll have people who just want to be contrarians or Twitter trolls or something like that will just try to rile people up and be like, hey, the Browns could actually trade Nick Chubb and save this much in cap space and yada yada. But I felt like 99% of Browns Twitter was on the side of, yeah, we shouldn't be messing with trading off Nick Chubb, and it wasn't really a thing that was prompted by anything. It's not like there were any solid reports about the Browns front office or Andrew Berry thinking about, oh, we'll send feelers out about Nick Chubb or anything like that. It was just kind of a result of some off-season boredom that manifested into, oh man, maybe the Browns are so they're so incompetent that they'll end up trading Nick Chubb in order to try to galaxy their brain into having more cap space or filling some other hole and creating a new problem. Where in honesty, that there was just nothing going on, and we're just thinking ourselves into problems that don't actually exist. And I do think that that's something that we do, obviously not just in scenarios of sports and trading away great athletes on teams that we cheer for, but we just do that in life in general, where we have nothing else to do, so we think about what events could lead to what outcomes, and if bad events lead to bad outcomes, then we have to make every effort to try to like avoid how that could happen inside of our own heads, when sometimes the chances of those things happening are slim to none in reality. Now we're going to do a hard transition into a Mountain Dew drink review, because again, this is a less focused video. I had this, and even though this isn't necessarily maybe what you came for, I will be marking chapters, so you're going to clearly know when the video has transitioned into Mountain Dew talk. So they're releasing a new limited edition for summer called Summer Freeze. It's the blue Mountain Dew. You might have seen it already, and I know. You can say that you don't know if I've drank it or not because I don't have it in front of me. I haven't drank it, but I will describe it to you, and if you've had one of these, then you'll know what I'm talking about when I say that. It's essentially just a bomb pop drink. It is it's a drink that tastes like a bomb pop. Well, essentially what you could do instead of, buying a Mountain Dew Summer Freeze, you could buy a bomb pop from an ice cream truck going around your neighborhood, stick that thing in like a plastic cup and leave it out in the sun for a couple hours, drink the melted liquid off of that, and then essentially you've just drank a whole Mountain Dew Summer Freeze in one thing. I took one drink and I essentially knew what was going on for the whole thing, and honestly it is a bit disappointing because I feel like it has a bit of a very, like, artificial isn't the right word, because Mountain Dew, everything is artificial. It's like chemically made, it's sugar, it's like all chemicals and artificial and stuff, but it has such a thin flavor that you can really only get away with something like an actual popsicle, where there is actually something there to make up for the thinness of the flavor. There's actually something there, but with Mountain Dew, it's just a drink. So it's just kind of a thin flavor. It's not really all that interesting, which I found disappointing because it is a blue Mountain Dew, and usually when Mountain Dew flavors are blue, I really like them. I really enjoy Voltage. I thought the Frostbite that they released in the winter, I think, of 2022 was actually pretty good. So to see this Summer Freeze just kind of be just a bomb pop flavor and nothing more, nothing less, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever drank, but I don't really need to ever buy one of those again in my life, because again, I can just go out to an ice cream shop or even there's like a convenience store and get a bomb pop and call it a day. So that's all the video is. It's, again, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit less focused. I just kind of want to get something out there because I haven't been uploading in a little bit. Just wanted to kind of get something out there. And I do feel like I had something to say about, the off season, and try not to freak out over nothing. Obviously, if there is some kind of big report about a notable player in Ohio, that might be something for concern, then I'll report on it. But with stuff like, Donovan Mitchell saying some stuff on Twitter that gets some people mad, or, Browns fans getting prematurely angry about the front office trading Nick Chubb, even though that's not reportedly happening at all in any reputable place, I feel like that's something we should try to avoid as much as possible, just to try to keep some sort of sanity as the off season keeps going. So thank you all for watching. If you made it this far into the video, I'll be impressed if you did, if you put up with that. I will see you at the next one.